In modern America, Christmas is an unstoppable force. It is the cultural, economic, and religious juggernaut of the calendar. The Christmas season now seems to start in October. We have an entire genre of movies, a dedicated radio format, and a national economy that depends on December sales. Every year, we hear pundits talk about the war on Christmas. The narrative is usually the same. Secular forces, atheists, or corporations are trying to remove Christ from the holiday, turning a sacred event into a generic happy holidays. But what if I told you that the real war on Christmas happened 350 years ago? What if I told you that the people waging this war weren't atheists, but the most intensely religious Christians on the continent? What if I told you that in the 17th century, in the city of Boston, celebrating Christmas wasn't just discouraged, it was a crime? If you were caught hanging a wreath, singing a carol, or even taking the day off work on December 25th, you could be fined, arrested, or publicly shamed. And the people arresting you would be the Puritans, the very pilgrims we associate with religious freedom. Why? Why would a group of people who dedicated their entire lives to Jesus Christ make it illegal to celebrate his birthday? The answer lies in a forgotten history of rowdy street parties, pagan rituals, theological purity, and a desperate attempt to control a holiday that in their view had nothing to do with the Bible and everything to do with the devil. Today, we are uncovering the time when Santa Claus was an outlaw. This is the story of the Puritan War against Yuletide. To understand why the Puritans hated Christmas, we first have to get inside their heads. The Puritans were radical reformers. They believed the Church of England was still too Catholic, too cluttered with man-made traditions. Their goal was to purify the Church by stripping away everything that wasn't explicitly commanded in the Bible. This is the regulative principle of worship. If the Bible doesn't say do it, you must not do it. So, they opened their Bibles to look for Christmas. And what did they find? Nothing. The Bible records the birth of Jesus, certainly, but it never tells us the date. It never commands a feast to celebrate it. It never mentions December 25th. In fact, the Puritans argued correctly, by historical standards, that shepherds would not have been watching their flocks by night in the dead of winter. For the Puritans, this silence was a red light. If God wanted us to celebrate Christ's birthday, he would have told us when it was. By picking an arbitrary date, humans were inventing a holy day. And to the Puritan mind, inventing a holy day was an act of idolatry. It was putting human tradition above God's law. But it wasn't just that it was invented, it was who invented it. The word Christmas itself was offensive to them. It means Christ's Mass. The Mass was the central Catholic ritual that the Puritans despised as superstition. To celebrate Christmas was to bow a knee to the Pope. They preferred to call December 25th Foolstide, or simply the 25th of December. So, objection number one was theological. It's unbiblical, and it's Catholic. But objection number two was social. And honestly, they had a point. When we think of a traditional Christmas today, we think of a Dickens novel. We think of family, a fireplace, quiet carols, charity, and children opening gifts. It is a domestic, child-centered, peaceful holiday. That is not what Christmas was in the 1600s. In early modern England, Christmas or Yuletide was not a single day. It was a 12-day festival from December 25th to January 6th. And it looked a lot less like a church service and a lot more like Mardi Gras or the Purge. It was a time of social inversion. The harvest was done, the beer was fermented, and the meat was slaughtered. It was a time of excess. Drunkenness, public intoxication was the norm. Gambling, dice and card games were rampant. The Lord of Misrule, towns would appoint a Lord of Misrule, a peasant who would lead the festivities, mocking the nobility and the church. Mumming and wassailing, this sounds quaint, but it was often menacing. Groups of young men, often wearing masks or blackening their faces, mumming, would roam the streets. They would go to the houses of the wealthy and demand food and high-quality alcohol. They would sing songs that were essentially threats. We won't go until we get some. If the homeowner refused, The carolers might vandalize the house or attack the owner. It was a rowdy, chaotic, drunken street festival that turned the social order upside down. It was associated with mad mirth, sexual license, and violence. For the Puritans, who valued order, sobriety, and discipline above all else, this was an abomination. They looked at Christmas and didn't see Jesus. They saw Saturnalia. And they were right. They knew their history. They knew that the church had placed Christmas on December 25th to co-opt the pagan Roman festivals of Saturnalia and Sol Invictus, and the Germanic festival of Yule. The Puritans argued that by keeping the holiday, Christians had not baptized these pagan customs. They had simply put a Christian mask on a pagan orgy. So, when the Puritans came to the New World to build a city on a hill, they decided to leave the Lord of Misrule back in England. When the Pilgrims spent their first Christmas in Plymouth in 1620, they spent it working. They built structures. They intentionally treated it as a normal day to set a precedent. But as the colony grew, new immigrants arrived who did want to celebrate. The tension grew. Finally, the Massachusetts Bay Colony decided to make it official. In 1659, the General Court of Massachusetts passed a law. It read, "For preventing disorders arising in several places within this jurisdiction, by reason of some still observing such festivals as were superstitiously kept in other countries, to the great dishonor of God and offense of others, it is therefore ordered that whosoever shall be found observing any such day as Christmas or the like, either by forbearing of labor, feasting, or any other way, shall pay for every such offense 5 shillings. 5 shillings was a significant amount of money. The ban was comprehensive. No time off. Shops were required to stay open. Schools were required to be in session. If you didn't show up for work, you were fined. No feasting. If you were caught cooking a special goose or pudding, you were suspect. No church services. Churches were closed. To hold a Christmas service was seen as popery. We have records of people being dragged into court for these crimes. We have diaries of Puritans complaining about their neighbors secretly drinking or reveling. It's important to note that this was regional. In Virginia, which was settled by Anglicans, the holiday was celebrated with balls, hunts, and feasts. But in New England, the intellectual hub of America, Christmas was a day of dark, pagan superstition. So, how did we get from a 5-shilling fine to the national Christmas tree? The ban was officially repealed in 1681, but only because the English king forced the colony to do it. The culture didn't change for a long time. In Boston, schools stayed open on Christmas Day until 1870. As late as 1850, a student at a New England college could still be disciplined for skipping class to go to a Christmas service. The war on Christmas ended not because of theology, but because of a rebranding campaign in the mid-19th century. Christmas had to be tamed. It had to be transformed from a rowdy, drunk, public street festival into a safe, quiet, domestic holiday. This happened through a few key cultural imports and inventions. 1. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. In 1848, a drawing was published showing the royal family standing around a decorated Christmas tree, a German tradition Albert brought with him. Suddenly, the tree which Puritans viewed as pagan became a symbol of respectable upper-class family life. 1. The new literature, authors like Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol, 1843, and Clement Clarke Moore, A Visit from St. Nicholas, 1823, reinvented the narrative. Dickens shifted the focus from partying to charity and family. He invented the spirit of Christmas as a force for moral goodness, something even a Puritan could begrudgingly respect. Moore, and later Thomas Nast, invented the modern Santa Claus. They took the old riotous Father Christmas figure and turned him into a jolly, safe, child-friendly gift giver who rewarded good behavior, very appealing to Victorian parents. This new Christmas, focused on children, home, charity, and family, was something the Protestant churches could finally embrace. It wasn't popish anymore, it was Victorian. By the 1870s, Christmas was declared a federal holiday. The Puritans had lost. So, the war on Christmas is real. but the aggressors were the Founding Fathers' ancestors. This history leaves us with a fascinating, lingering debate within American Christianity. On one side, the Puritan argument: were the Puritans right? Did they correctly identify that Christmas is, at its core, a non-biblical, commercialized, pagan-rooted festival that often distracts from the actual gospel? When we look at the stress, the debt, and the consumerism of a modern December, do we see exactly the disorder they warned us about? Was their attempt to keep worship pure a noble, if doomed, effort? On the other side, the incarnational argument: or were they killjoys who missed the point? Did they fail to understand the human need for rhythm, for celebration, and for joy? Did their obsession with biblical silence blind them to the theological beauty of the incarnation, the idea that God entered the messy physical world? If God became flesh, isn't it appropriate to celebrate with feasting, singing, and light in the darkest time of the year? Even if we borrowed the candles from the pagans, who understood the faith better, the Puritan fasting in his shop on December 25th, or the Victorian family gathering around a tree? Let me know your thoughts, respectfully, in the comments below. If you found this deep dive into the time when Santa was an outlaw fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that uncovers the hidden stories behind our beliefs. Thanks for watching.